Hello friends, I'm George, the nice medic gentleman. Welcome back to the channel guys, I hope that all of you are doing well. Last week I did a mega Lattafa video where I showed you all Lattafa fragrances that I currently have in my collection. And today in this video I'm going to do the same but with Maison Alhambra. So fasten your seatbelts and get ready for a lot of Maison Alhambra scents. And I'll start with Maison Alhambra. Now this fragrance is a clone of YSL EDP. On its own, it's not a bad fragrance, it's not a bad clone of EDP, but simply I haven't been enjoying the original fragrance that much, so that means that I'm not enjoying the clones again that much. On its own though, not a bad scent, not a bad clone of performance. Is acceptable, let's call it that. Price tag is pretty low, it's a nice versatile fragrance. The next one that I'm going to show you here is called The Artist Number 1, and this fragrance is a clone of Frederic Maile's Portrait of a Lady. You get that very rosy, slightly sweet, slightly spicy and very woody scent profile. A strong agar oud note here with also again quite a lot of smokiness. I expected this to be a better performer based on the scent profile, because usually fragrances that have these notes tend to be quite good performers, but here I was a bit disappointed. It's definitely a performance, definitely above average, but not as good as I expected it to be. But still, again, on its own, not a bad fragrance and not a bad clone of Portrait of a Lady. And this one is for the guys who love rose-based fragrances. The next one will be Toro per Homme. This fragrance is a very decent clone of Terre d'Hermès. It has a bit of an age factor like the original scent has. It's a, you get that citrusy opening, you get quite a lot of vetiver and ouds on the dry down. Performance surprisingly good actually. It's a little bit sweeter compared to the original fragrance. It's dirty cheap, so if you're looking for a good alternative to Terre d'Hermès, then Toro per Homme is definitely a good option. It's just that I don't really enjoy that scent profile that much. The next one is one of their Tom Ford clones, and it's called Fabulo Intense, and this is a clone of FM Fabulous by Tom Ford. Again, a pretty decent clone. On its own, a good fragrance with, again, surprisingly good performance. The only thing is, again, I'm not enjoying the original scent profile that much. The next one, a member of the Jean Lowe line of fragrances, which all are clones of Louis Vuitton scents. This one is called Nouveau, and I think this is a clone of Nuovo Mondo by Louis Vuitton. I've never tried the original fragrance, but this thing just does not work for me. It's very heavy on the agar oud note, has some spices, some ambery sweetness, some cacao sweetness as well, but just that agar oud note is just too overwhelming for my taste particularly. But so I cannot tell you also how close this is to the original scent because I've never tried it, but this one is a very, very good performer. Actually a good thing. You get a magnetic cap, and the presentation and the bottle design are quite nice, but I'm not enjoying the scent on its own that much. The next one will be this one that's called Baroque Rouge Extrait, and this is a clone of MFK's Baccarat Rouge 540 Extrait. Performance wise, not as good as I expected it to be. I just think there are better clones out there of BR 540 Extrait, and that's why I'm listing this here. But as you can see, there's been quite a good dent made into the juice level, because my wife actually wears this fragrance quite a lot. Another thing that I don't like about this fragrance is the fact that it has a very leaky atomizer, at least my bottle, so quality control isn't really that good. And the last fragrance that I'm going to show you in this section is called Porto Neroli, and this is of course a clone of Tom Ford's Portofino Neroli Portofino, excuse me. Again, not a bad clone, not a bad fragrance on its own, actually quite a good clone with a pretty decent performance, especially considering the scent profile of this fragrance. It's heavy on the Neroli note, it's very fresh, very clean, a great scent for the summertime actually. Again, pretty good performance for a freshie. I'm just not a huge fan of the original scent profile. called Karat. This fragrance is a clone of Tiziana Terenzi's Kirke. It's a very good clone of the original scent. You get that very fruity, very musky scent profile that leans a little bit to the feminine side. It's great for the warm weather. Performance here is pretty decent. You get a nice quality presentation, and all in all, it's a very good clone of Kirke. Can also serve as a good alternative to Herba Pura from Xerjoff as well. The next one will be this one, Dark Door Intense. This is a fragrance that I have not yet done a full review of, but as you can probably tell by the bottle design and the name, this fragrance is a clone of Dior's Homme Sport. It's a pretty decent clone, scent-wise pretty close to the original fragrance, although I think this is a little bit more musky compared to what I get from my bottle of Dior Homme Sport. But other than that, it's quite close. You get that citrusy, woody, musky scent profile that's great for, you know, the warm weather. And all in all, it's a very versatile fragrance. The original scent and Dark Door Sport. At least from my initial testing, Dark Door Sport seems to be a pretty good performer. The next one is another Tom Ford clone. This one is called Amber and Leather, and this of course is a clone of Tom Ford's Ombre Leather. It's a pretty decent clone. It's a little bit sweeter, a little bit more fruity compared to the original scent. The leather note doesn't feel as strong as I get from the original fragrance, but again a pretty decent clone. Performance here is above average, not as good as I expected it to be, and not as good as some other people claim to be. Maybe my batch is not that good, but it's a good cheap alternative for you know, Ombre Leather. The next one is Perseus Exclusive, and this is a clone of Parfum de Marly's Pegasus Exclusive. You get that vanillic nutty scent profile that has some oods, you know, heavily relies on the combination of vanilla and bitter almond. Again, I'm not a huge fan of the original fragrance, of the original scent profile, but this so far seems to be a pretty decent clone. I've not done a full review of this one yet as well, but so far seems to have pretty decent performance and a very low price tag. The next one will be Your Touch for men, and this is a clone of Armani's Stronger With You EDT. Not as sweet as the original fragrance, feels slightly lighter, slightly fresher take on the original DNA, but I really like this fragrance. It has a very good performance, a very low price tag, and works great as a cold weather scent, and a great cheap option for a date night fragrance in my opinion. The next one is my latest Maison Alhambra fragrance that I reviewed, that's called Glacier Bolt, and this is a clone of the Le Beau line of fragrances from Jean Paul Gaultier. To my nose, it stands somewhere between the EDT and the Le Parfum version. It's slightly less sweet and less fruity compared to the original scents. Feels a little bit lighter, a little bit more aromatic, but I actually like this because I'm not a huge fan of the original scents. They're just too fruity, too sweet, too coconutty for my taste, and this one sort of rectifies that problem for me. The only, you know, downside for me about this fragrance is the lack of performance. It's been, let's call it, a little bit above average, but it's not a bad alternative for the Le Beau fragrances from Jean Paul Gaultier. The next one is yet another member of the Jean Lowe line that's called Matière. I think the original fragrance is called Matière Noir, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I've not tried the original scent, but this one is a very interesting sort of fragrance that has a nice amount of rose, of agar oud. There's some ambery sweetness, maybe some fruity sweetness in here as well. It's very light, very delicate scent that leans a little bit to the feminine side, but I really enjoy wearing this one. I really like it, and this fragrance has a very good performance, and again you get a magnetic cap, which I always like with fragrances. The next one will be Baroque Satin Oud, a great clone of Oud Satin Mood by MFK. You get that very jammy, rosy scent profile with lots of agar oud and lots of amber sweetness. Very strong, very potent fragrance. Very huge, sort of a huge projecting fragrance, and pretty much a beast mode when it comes to longevity as well. Really nicely done and perfectly unisex scent, and another great choice for people who really like rose-based fragrances. The next one will be one of the best clones that I have ever tried when it comes to how close they are to the original scent. It's called Victorioso Victory. Nowadays I think it's called Victorioso Nero, if I'm not mistaken. This is a clone of Paco Rabanne's Invictus Victory, and it's a very nicely done clone. Super close scent-wise to the original scent, pretty much equal when it comes to performance. Very a versatile scent, very likable fragrance that can be used all year round. And the best thing out of all is that it's super cheap. So if you're looking for a great clone of Paco Rabanne's Invictus Victory, then Victorioso Victory is definitely a great choice for that. The next one is called Jorge di Profumo, and this one is an interesting take on the Armani's Acqua di Gio Profumo DNA. It's done pretty nicely, lacks a bit of the seriousness, a bit of the incensey vibe that you get out of the original scent, but other than that, it's a very nice, fresh type of scent, aquatic scent. That's again super versatile, super masculine, a very classic scent. Performance here is about average, maybe slightly above average, and it's pretty cheap. The next one is called Glacier Le Noir, another member of the Great Glacier line. This fragrance is a clone of Jean-Paul Gaultier's Le Mot Le Parfum. The original scent is one of my all-time favorite designer fragrances, and Le Noir, unfortunately for me, doesn't come that close to the original scent. Feels a little bit, of course, lesser quality, which is to be expected. Feels a little bit less sweet. It has less iris in it, a note that I absolutely love. But, on its own, it's not a bad fragrance. Pretty similar to the original fragrance. Performance here is pretty decent, but I'm not a huge fan of the Glacier design when it comes to the Glacier line of fragrances. The last fragrance in this part of the video is called Zafiro Collections Regale. I don't know how exactly to pronounce the name of this fragrance. This is a clone of the Mimes Regent Leather. I've never tried the original scent, so I cannot tell you how close this is to the original scent, but I can tell you how this smells quickly. It has a nice amount of leather. There's some rose, there's some vanillic sweetness, some amber sweetness in here as well. It feels, you get some citruses in the opening. It's a very interesting scent that's very delicate, very light in the air, and perfectly unisex. I'm still testing this one out. Performance so far seems to be about average, but at least in my opinion, this is a perfectly unisex fragrance. Complete Tabac, and this fragrance is a clone of Tabacular from the Dior private line. You get a fruity tobacco-based fragrance that has quite a lot of sweetness, although this to my nose feels a little bit less sort of on fruity sweet compared to the original scent. This feels a little bit more heavy on the tobacco note, slightly less sweet. Performance here is great. The next one that I'm going to show you is called Salvo Intense, and this is a clone of Dior Sauvage EDP, and it's actually a very good clone of Sauvage EDP. Scent-wise, very close to the original scent. You get that very sort of an universal, very versatile scent that works all year round. It's very likable. It's a compliment getter. Performance here is surprisingly good, and the best thing out of all is the very cheap price tag. The next one is going to be one of the most hyped up fragrances from the house of Maison Alhambra, that's called the Tux, and this of course is a clone of YSL Tuxedo. It's a pretty nicely done, very close to the original fragrance with good performance, not like superb performance, but still, above average. And the only problem with this fragrance is that it can be very hard to find sometimes, and because of the amount of hype that this received, the prices sometimes can reach outrageous levels. So just don't overpay for this fragrance. But on its own, it's a great scent, and it's a very good clone of Tuxedo. The next one will be this, that's called Signatures number 2, and this is a very interesting clone of Mancera's Red Tobacco. It's has a nice twist. It feels darker, more woody. It's less sweet compared to the original scent. It has a sort of a rougher tobacco note in here. It has a very nice leather note. All in all, it's a very nice fragrance with fantastic performance and sort of a very masculine take on the red tobacco DNA. The only problem that I find with this fragrance is the 50 milliliter bottle size. Apart from that, a great little fragrance. The next one will be a clone of Initio's Atomic Rose, that's called Infini Rose. A very nice, delicate rose scent that feels sort of very balanced. It's not overly sweet, it's not overly floral. It has enough freshness, but at the same time, enough sweetness in here. Leans a little bit to the feminine side, but I really like this one. And the best thing about this fragrance is the very good performance. So if you're not afraid to wear rose-based fragrances that lean a little bit to the feminine side, definitely check out Infini Rose. The next one is a clone of Memo Paris African Leather, and it's called Afro Leather from Maison Alhambra. The opening is a little bit rough around the edges. The spices, the quality of the spices that's been used in here is not really that good, but once you get past that opening, the dry down is very enjoyable. And it's very close to the original scent. It's very sort of warm, very sweet, with a nice amount of spiciness on the dry down, with very decent performance. The next one is this Exposé Intense. I'll never get tired of saying this, but this is a hidden gem of a fragrance. Very cheap scent that has a bit of an sort of an old school vibe to it. It's sweet, it's has a nice amount of sweetness, a nice amount of woodiness, a nice amount of freshness and spiciness. Very versatile scent that works all year round, with pretty decent performance. I really like this one. Let's end it here. The next one is another Parfum de Marly's clone. This one is called Hercules, and it's clone of Parfum de Marly's Herod. You get that sweet tobacco-based fragrance. I really like the original DNA. I'm a huge fan of sweet tobacco-based scents, and Hercules is actually a pretty good clone of the original. The only problem that I find with this one is the performance, not so much the lasting power, more the projection, because this at least on my skin tends to be, you know, more of an intimate type of scent. It's not a very loud fragrance, but I really like the scent profile. The next one will be another very hyped up fragrance from the house of Maison Alhambra that's called Kismet Angel. This of course is a clone of Kilian's Angel Share, and it's probably one of the most hyped up, if not the most hyped up clone of Angel Share. To this day, in my opinion, Kismet Angel is the closest thing that you can get in the opening to the original fragrance. You get that very nice, sweet and boozy opening that, you know, Maison Alhambra have almost, you know, completely spot on replicated the original scent. The dry down, to my nose, is not as close to the original as the opening. Performance here is above average, but nothing spectacular. Although it's on its own, it's a great scent. Again, just don't overpay for this, because sometimes can be hard to find, and prices can reach outrageous levels. The next one will be one of the newer scents, if not the newest Maison Alhambra scent in my collection. That's called Matière de Blue. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing it right. This is a very interesting clone of Bleu de Chanel, but for me it's like a mix between the EDP and the Parfum versions. It's a little bit darker compared to the EDP, and actually it's surprisingly good, at least so far, that from what I've tested. The scent seems to be pretty good when it comes to the quality, and performance has been surprisingly good. So stay tuned for a full review on this one. The next one will be the last member of the Jean Lowe line that I have in my collection. That's called Ombre. Nowadays I think it has a different name. I'm not too sure what the name of the fragrance is nowadays, but this is a very nice clone of Louis Vuitton's Ombre Nomade. You get that leathery, woody, rosy, ambery, incensey type of scent profile. Very Middle Eastern vibe, with a pretty good performance and you know, pretty good projection. Again, super high quality when it comes to the bottle design, magnetic cap and all that stuff. It's slightly different to my nose. This has a slightly different type of leather note that's been used in here compared to the original scent, but it's a very good alternative for Ombre Nomade. The next one will be Glacier Ultra, the last Glacier fragrance that I'm going to show you. In this video, it's a clone of Jean Paul Gaultier's Ultra Mole, and it's very nicely done. Lacks a bit of the bubble gummy sweetness up top in the opening, but other than that, it's very close to the original fragrance and can rival 9 PM when it comes to quality of the scent. Very nice, very youthful fragrance with a very good performance. A surprisingly good performer when it comes to the lasting power and the projection. The next one will be this one, Dark Door Intense, a very good clone of Dior Homme Intense. Scent-wise, probably the closest thing that you can get to Dior Homme Intense. You get that very lipsticky, sweet iris based fragrance that feels very powdery, very makeup-y. Performance, lasting power is pretty good, but it's a fragrance that just does not project very loud, and that's my only gripe with this fragrance. But the scent itself is super close to the original, you know, fragrance, and that's my all-time most favorite DNA, Dark Door Intense. The next one will be this Maison Alhambra Cassius. That's a clone of Parfum de Marly's Carlisle, and it's done very nicely. The opening is slightly different, but the dry down is very close, and I really love the original DNA. I love the original fragrance, and Cassius does a great job at copying the original scent. Performance is very good, projection is very good, and the price tag is pretty low. And that leads me to the last two fragrances in this video. The first one will be Zafiro Collection Crafted Oud, a clone of Tamim's Carved Oud, and also can serve as an alternative for Tom Ford's Oud. Great oud-based fragrance. A nice amount of agar oud in here with a nice amount of spiciness. Also get you know, quite a lot of ambery sweetness. It's a dark, spicy, sexy DNA scent profile. I absolutely love it. Performance is great. I really like the design of the, you know, Zafiro Collection bottles. Performance, the staying power on skin is pretty good, so just keep in mind that this is not a very loud fragrance, but it's very sexy and very masculine. I really like it. And the last fragrance in this video, exclusive Tabac, a great clone of Carolina Herrera's Mystery Tobacco. Again, another sweet, spicy, tobacco-based scent that's absolutely fantastically blended, has a fantastic performance, has a nice boozy note in here. All in all, it's just it's a superb fragrance. I really like it. Very good performance, very good projection, and as long as you can find it for a decent price and you like tobacco-based fragrances, you cannot go wrong with exclusive Tabac. And so guys, I just showed you all 35 Maison Alhambra fragrances from my collection. I hope that you found this video interesting or entertaining. If you did, give it a like, and I also hope that you're going to join me in the next one. And until then, stay safe and bye bye.